Following the tragic events of Devilman, we find ourselves in a different reality entirely. However, despite being set in a different universe, we still seem to be following a Fudou. Except this time, instead of Akira, it's Jun Fudou, a former swimmer, athlete, as well as a local teacher who lives with her younger brother since her parents are away doing research in the States. For reasons unknown to the character, she begins to experience certain physical urges and very uncomfortable nightmares all of a sudden, with no clear indication as to where they would be stemming from. Shortly after her weird experiences begin, Jun decides to take a group of her students on a school getaway trip in the hopes of relaxing a little bit and refocusing herself since they've all been working so hard. This is where things start to get a little strange. After arriving at their cabin, they have a run-in with a rival boys sports team that is known for being quite aggressive, and as Jun de-escalates the situation, it becomes apparent that these dudes are not normal. You know, a little time passes and the team is finally settling. The boys are goofing around and the ladies are relaxing, but of course, all good things must come to an end as the rival team suddenly assaults the group, as they do, transforming into terrible demons and proceeding to murder or have their way with the various team members we've grown closer to. As the carnage continues to unfold, something inside of Jun awakens and she transforms into a form that we've become especially acquainted with, killing the demons and saving the rest of the students before being introduced to a mysterious woman who watched the whole thing unfold, and maybe even manipulated it, Ran Asuka. After Ran and Jun's father explain an odd phenomenon known as the Devil Beast Syndrome to Jun, her father begins explaining how he doesn't think it's at all a supernatural phenomenon, merely nature's way of curbing human overpopulation. And despite most people not retaining their humanity after their transformations, Jun can, and so she must become Devilman Lady, as dubbed by Ran, and protect humanity from the machinations of the Devil Beast. Devilman Lady is a very interesting manga. Go Nagai really wanted to impress upon his audience the power of true love and understanding of oneself as he was telling the story of Akira Fudou and Devilman. But that whole message seems to be turned on its head as Devilman Lady has several recurring themes of lust, the power that it brings, and the effects of self-control or lack thereof. Devilman Lady is pivotal to the story of Akira Fudou and Devilman, but it takes even more of a monster of the weak tone, and if you compare the two, it definitely seems like Lady more readily pushed the envelope as far as sexual content goes. After taking on various devil beasts, Jun and Ran become fast friends, as their sense of duty and subtle exclusion from the rest of society seems to make them form a tighter bond. It's around this time in the story, when you're finally used to the characters and the conflicts that they tend to face, that Jun begins investigating a potential human trafficking cult operating out of the Grumesh embassy. Grumek, I don't know, bro. As Jun explores her lead, it becomes very apparent that weird shiz is definitely popping off at the local embassy, as homies start following Jun home, spying on her through the windows, and generally being pretty creepy. Now, we've all heard of the old school infiltration operations where an FBI agent will infiltrate the mafia or a gang and become an inside man of sorts. Well, this is the approach that Jun takes, and after nailing an admin job at the embassy, she's invited to a company dinner. Now, for a little bit more context, some random old janitor tells Jun after she gets the job, "Hey yo shorty, please do not work here. These fools are crazy." But this works only to intrigue Jun more. So she goes to the dinner, and despite the numerous red flags, Jun proceeds to eat and drink, only to end up getting drugged and strapped to a bed, where she ends up becoming the sacrifice to the great god Varava and his band of merry cultists. This is by far the most gratuitous part of the entire series. I really don't know what Go Nagai was going for with this one, other than it's setting up the giant hell portal that opens up as things are happening, and the reintroduction of our favorite and recently deceased crybaby demon boy. Gratuitous demon rape scenes aside, the following arc is actually kind of dope despite the very uncomfortable events that lead up to it. We're met with the reintroduction of Akira as he quickly comes to Jun's rescue in the depths of hell by defeating Varava's minions and informing the audience and Jun of who he is and what he's been up to as they descend the 9 circles of hell. Essentially, after Akira's loss to Satan at the end of Devilman, he and the remnants of his world ceased to exist. As the universe was reset by God, Akira watched as the world he once knew subsequently morphed and changed into a reality unrecognizable. And so he found himself in hell as a wandering spirit with no agency in the physical world anymore. During this dialogue, we also find out more about hell, as it was inspired by Dante's Inferno, and we even learn that the various beings from myths exist, such as the Titans and Gorgons from Greek mythology. It becomes apparent that most of the monsters humanity had created were actually demons that at one point existed or influenced humanity, such as the Egyptian Sphinx, Eastern European vampires, and so on and so forth. But in typical Go Nagai fashion, the pair of devilmen fall in love during their descent to the depths of hell, which results in things happening again. Shortly after realizing their love for each other, which definitely seems more one-sided if you ask me. I mean, the dude has been surrounded by gross demons for like millennia, June, come on. Anyway, we see a couple of familiar faces during their descent. Cyrene and Kain pop up out of nowhere and hassle Akira because this fool won't call Cyrene back, and it's not long after that we reach the depths of hell. A frozen wasteland where people are half frozen in ice to exist in perpetual agony under the frozen and ever watchful eye of the demon general Xenon. Unfortunately, Satan isn't here to talk to them, so Akira decides to lead June out of hell, describing to her their past history and how he knows Ryo was right about God being evil the entire time. At that conclusion, the two find the exit, and June promises to never forget him, as he has no place in the real world anymore. And so she leaves hell with a newfound determination to save Akira, but also to become a better Devilman Lady. Alright, so before I get into the final hump of the Devilman Lady story, I do want to say how much I really enjoyed this arc. Not only does it add much needed elaboration to the lore surrounding the Devilman universe, but it characterizes Akira quite a bit more outside of the bad boy shonen stereotype that became prevalent largely due to his own real influence in the world. I can't really say the same for June, but the more that I ponder the nature of her character, especially after the plot twist of the series is revealed, I'm left wondering if her immediate attraction to this man was an intentional hint by Go Nagai. Anyway, as is a standard for Devilman Lady, immediately following the most pivotal arc in the manga, shenanigans ensue, and June begins to slowly forget about Akira. I dig Go Nagai sticking to his guns on this concept rather than falling back on his most popular character to take over the story. He even creates a subplot in which the Grumesh embassy no longer exists after the destruction of Virava and his followers in hell at the hands of Devilman. The best way to explain it is that June literally gets isekai'd, which begs the question of why the demon sex scenes needed to happen if they were immediately going to be retconned despite June distinctly having faint memories of them. Come on Go, sometimes I worry about you, man. Following the June isekai arc, we find out why Ran is so creepy around June and her family and how connected she is with the events that lead up to June becoming Devil Lady. Akira begins his own spirit investigation with his newfound ghosty wosty powers and decides to dig into Ran's past to discover how the seemingly random sidekick plays into everything. We learn that Ran had been in the background spying on June since the very beginning of the story, not only plotting to force her Devil Beast transformation, but also just generally being a perverted creep. As Akira tries to mind meld with Ran so he can learn of her origins, she becomes aware of him and begins seeing visions of him clear as day, which is why she leaves for a few chapters in the first place. It's weird timey-wimey stuff, but just know Akira cannot find out much more about her than what I told you guys. Back in the present, Ran is revealing to June's parents that she's actually the product of a previous marriage between Mrs. Fudou and another man. Mrs. Fudou was forced to leave the marriage due to demons threatening Ran's father, and in return for doing what the demons asked, they gave her dad fat stacks and a dope life. This is where things get admittedly very weird and the manga actually started losing me. Ran describes that she was actually born as a male, but through psychological conditioning, she was able to flood her body with the hormones necessary to completely switch genders after a certain point. This, funnily enough, does not bother me. Devilman is weird, stuff like this was expected to happen at some point, especially in Devilman Lady, and just generally, like, that doesn't weird me out at all. That said, bear with me, I will get to the nonsense that weirded me out soon enough. You guys just needed some context for what happens later. You've been warned. Also, forgot to clarify, this does in fact make Asuka and June half-siblings. For those of you who may be a little confused, don't worry, I was too. The story of Devilman Lady so far has been building up to a repeat of what we've experienced already in Devilman, with slightly altered circumstances. Remember Ryu Utsugi, the guy from Demon Lord Dante that I talked about earlier? He makes an appearance, and after attaining a massive Devil Beast cult following, he goes to hell, fuses with Xenon, and opens the gates of hell, causing an outpour of demons, devilmen, and mythical beings to flood the world. Once again, chaos runs rampant and the forces of God and Satan, who's still missing, begin preparing for their inevitable war once again. Remember that weird shiz that I said I would get back to you later? Well, it's later. We cut back to the perspective of June as she deals with the onset of chaos, destruction, and giant demons showing up out of nowhere. She decides to go back to her apartment and get some rest to prepare for the ensuing battle when Ran suddenly steps out from behind the door. I actually laughed when I read this part because this fool was actually standing there behind the door in the darkness like a creeper. Anyway, Ran, who is now in his male form, proceeds to woohoo with June, his half-sister, and impregnate her before disappearing into the night. Yeah, that's right, I'm not gonna say it again, but you just heard me correctly. Cut to a week later and June is in labor. She gives birth and it is none other than a reincarnated Akira Fudou. Yeah, that's right, Akira jumped into the body of this baby after the gates of hell opened in order to have a new physical body on some Lord Voldemort shit. Come on, dude, what was happening? What were you thinking? After this, Akira begins growing at an exponential rate, becoming an adult in only a few days. Ran finally shows up and explains to June how her memories have been sealed by Psycho Ginny again, much like in the classic series. Ran also explains that June and her are actually two halves of Satan that split in the hopes of escaping God's time loop and freeing Akira from hell after the events of Devilman. After this, June and Asuka fuse back into Rio just as Akira arrives to say what up to his boy who he definitely woohooed with in hell all those chapters ago. I don't know why that's so funny. Also, it begs the question, why did Rio necessarily have to woohoo with himself other than to flex? Because June and Asuka definitely get together. Like, Go Nagai was on a level of creative writing that is just imperceivable by the mortal mind, I guess. Anyway, with Devilman and Satan now on the same team, they square off with the Archangel Michael above the earth, much like Akira and Rio did in their final battle. Rio turns to Akira before telling him that hope lies on the other side of this battle, as both sides launch their attacks and the earth is destroyed once again. The outcome of the battle is unknown as the Age of Myth descends upon the world for the second time. Alright guys, so as much as I enjoyed the lore that enraptured the Devilman series, Devilman Lady was a lot. I can say with full certainty that why can't I say that word? Anyway, Devilman is one of my favorite stories, and its influence in other media has garnered in my heart and those of many others around the world a fervent love for Go Nagai and the worlds that he's created. Despite this, however, Devilman Lady is just so weird at times, and even at its best, I think it serves better as a supplement to the classic series, rather than standing on its own as anything other than wish fulfillment and 2D porn. I know that that's really harsh, but as I've gone back to reevaluate the series, most of the sequel series felt like a weird, sexually frustrated fever dream. And as you guys know, I call it how it is. That said, don't simply take my word for it. June Fudou is inherently a deeper and more psychologically profound character than Akira at times. And the things that I enjoyed about the series, such as the world building and follow-up to the original series, I really enjoyed. In all honesty, I think Go Nagai was answering the question that many fans had at the time. Can Devilman be more graphic? And the answer is a resounding yes. But graphic content with no meaning is just that. And it was at that time that I began reading Devilman Lady that I grew an appreciation for what Devilman Classic brought to the table. If you're looking for a standalone manga to read late at night when nobody's watching or just want closure on the OG series, by all means, read this manga and decide for yourself if you enjoy it. And with the conclusion of Devilman, we find ourselves with just one more hurdle to go, not including the spin-offs, which will be a separate video because there are so many. The final mainline entry in the Devilman saga is exactly that, Devilman Saga. Let's do a full dive into the culmination of decades of storytelling coming to an end, or maybe not. Okay, so it's been quite a few days since I even started on this portion of the video because researching it was just so extensive. Essentially, to make a short story even shorter, Devilman Saga never got a full translation into English as far as I could find at least. If you do find one, please toss it to me. So I was debating whether to tell you guys the story that I'm aware of so far or to just cap the video out at Devilman Lady, and I've decided that instead of giving you guys an abridged retelling, I'll leave that for the next Devilman video if I can locate a translation. Devilman is such an odd story, but ever since I first watched Devilman Crybaby on a whim one night back in November of 2020, I've been drawn to this world and the oddly compelling characters that live in it. I can't speak for the entire series as I've only heard whispers of how it ends, but following Akira and Rio as they test the boundaries of not just their relationship, but shape the world around them to protect the ones that they love, it's kind of beautiful even if that world is bound to get reset. I think it's that kind of relationship that we all long for, the kind where you'd make the world stop to protect the other person, and that resonates with me in a way that's kind of scary. The more time we spend in this world, the more I realize that Go Nagai wasn't writing this story just to shock people or to necessarily create a shonen hit, even if he did end up doing those things. He wrote it as a way to challenge society to be themselves and to love regardless of what happens in the world around them, regardless of the demons society would create in order to stop you, because when it's all said and done, life will continue to move forward. This has been a beast of a script to write, but I'm glad that I did. Before I started doing this YouTube stuff, it was often hard for me to find the words to convey how I felt about the world around me. But through this amazing experience, I've met people, lost people, and grown every single day, and as hard as it can be sometimes, the good definitely outweighs the bad. My name is kingrevolt, and I'm here to stay. I hope you guys enjoyed this longer video, and I want you all to know that nothing worth fighting for is ever easy, including your place in this world. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Bro, now I gotta write the second part. Oh my god. Oh, I freaking hate Devilman. Not really. I love it.